Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. It's the biggest freewheeling live stream poetry podcast on the planet, in your ear and on your laptops. Our guest for episode number 299 is Yoda Olinyk. She'll be here in just a few minutes, but before we get in, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this. We love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Leave reviews on iTunes or Spotify or Amazon Music or anywhere else you're listening to it later. If you're watching it live on X or Facebook, try to leave comments there and share and do whatever you can to help spread poetry around the internet. That's all we ask, and that's what we love to do at Rattle. Now we're going to start out like we always do with our Poets Respond poets, and we have two this week. We have Bunkong Tuon with a wonderful poem, really moving about the war in Iran. And then we also have a surprise guest coming up for a bonus poem tomorrow as well. It was a full, rich week of poetry at Poets Respond, and we have two poems to share with you. I'm going to read Bunkong Tuon's poem first, and he couldn't be here. He had a prior engagement at this time, but I'll read the note first. This is what he said. There you go. He said, "I wrote this poem a couple of days before the U.S. bombed Iran. My family and I are Cambodian refugees. A lot of thoughts were swirling in my head. The poem tries to capture some of those thoughts." And then this is this wonderful poem. And, the poem itself, let me just read it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit too. But I love the plain-spoken truth of this poem and the direct honesty of it. This is Bunkong Tuon, What the War Has Taught Us. God dies when a bomb is dropped. God dies when a child is killed. God dies when families are torn asunder and neighbors become strangers. War makes orphans of us all. War makes refugees of us all. War makes us small. In a war, politicians get reelected and warmongers get richer. A poet is made when a bomb is dropped, but no one listens to poets anyway. Home is what is left of family. A bed is the dirt on our backs. We survivors speak to the dead because the living won't listen to us. The living go on living. Lawns are mowed, bills are paid, vacations are taken. The sun plants warm kisses on their skins. Movies are made and the people shake their hips to the music they love. The music is senseless, like the movies, without thought and heart. The movies are in technicolor, full of laughter and joy. Even war movies have happy endings. For those who refuse the theatrics, they hug their children, send money, pray. They take to the streets, but nothing happens. That's the way of this world. To end war, those who call the shots must put their own blood on the front line. But that will never happen. The machinery of war is efficient, the wool pulled over our eyes. War continues. Our suffering is endless. It goes on and on. Once started, the war never ends. We are telling you this. We are telling you this. We are telling you this. And that was Bunkong Tuon, once again. Just a powerfully heartfelt and so direct, that poem, and so true, what the war has taught us. And so now we're going to have our second Poets Respond poet, and this is going to come out Monday. We had an opening on Monday, and so this will be tomorrow's poem of the day. And the poet is none other than Kim Addonizio. Hey, Kim, how you doing?
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to
Good to
have you
see you.
back. And you were a guest for the second time just in this winter in January, and it's great to have you back with a wonderful Poet Respond poem. And like I told you over email, this poem I've been having struggling sort of getting into poetry the last couple weeks. Actually, it's one of those funks, And this poem has so much energy and life that it kind of brought me back to life a little bit and reminded me why I like poetry. So I really appreciate that. What was the poem? What was the inspiration for this, and how did this poem come to be?
Well, it's called Reading the Times, and that's exactly where it came from, was reading the New York Times, as well as the idea of just reading the times that we're living in. And yeah, and it's been so hard to keep up with the news and to respond, and I kind of just was in a state of overwhelm, as many of us are, and it started writing about that. And then specifically the headline that sort of triggered things for me was the account of the toxic homes of Los Angeles, where there are a lot of homes that look untouched but by the fires, but in fact are full of toxic materials, so they're basically uninhabitable still.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you find a way to enter the subject matter? I mean, the first line, so many things to be afraid of, and then you start sort of listing them. Is that the thing that came to you first? Is that the first thought you had reading the
It
article?
was, yeah. It was so many things to be afraid of. And so from there I had many possibilities of what to write next.
Hmm.
So it definitely launched me into a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and read it for us right now?
Sure. I thought I'd mention maybe the first line deserves a little explanation, not because probably some people, but not everybody knows about the Sword of Damocles, which is an ancient Greek king named Dionysus was sort of the envy of his guy in his court was envious of him, and so he let him sit on his throne, but he put a sword above his head held by a horsehair. So there was the sword, and sort of obviously making the point that even a king and the powerful are always in a state of danger. And so I think it was that precarity that I sort of translated into the first line of the poem. So this is reading the times. So many things to be afraid of. The space junk of Damocles orbiting in the troposphere. That worrisome spot on my friend's pancreas. The disappearance of the bagel man and donut lady and farm worker to far off destinations while the asylum issues new protocols for the planet. There go the forests and trout streams of your youth, and here comes another blackout. Your apartment gone dark as a fresh coal on the tongue about to be fired, like the one the pharaohs offered Moses. The choice was that or gold. The story goes some angel shoved his hand toward the coal, so he ended up purified, but also stuttering, like the brother I spent my childhood hiding from in my father's closet, below rows of suit coats, next to the electric buffer for his shoes. The buffers were soft wool, and my brother the wolf raged through the house like a man with a custom power tool through a federal grant program. If Jesus saves, he must be saving up for something big, waiting for the last possible moment, which is what hardcore evangelicals think, I guess, but those people really terrify me. In the city of angels, chloride, anions in the light fixtures, cyanide in the sofas and baseboards, and benzene in the air, while in the city of St. Francis, at sunset, a jobless man casts his line from a dock to feed his family with fish that will kill them, hauling up bass and white sturgeon from the shining, blameless waters of the bay.
Yeah, just a wonderful poem, Kim. Thanks so much for sharing that and captures so well the feeling of reading the times, as the title says. I really appreciate all you do, and thanks for coming on and sharing this poem with everybody tomorrow.
Thanks so much, Tim. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, once again, that was Kim Addonizio. The two poems we had for Poets Respond this week. That was Reading the Times, and that's going to be the poem of the day tomorrow on Rattle.com. If you're not subscribed to our daily poem by email, just go to Rattle.com. Down at the bottom, in the footer, you'll see sign up here for the daily poem by email. All you got to do is put in your email address there, and then you'll get a poem in your inbox at 5:30 a.m. my time here in Texas, but whatever time it is for you, you'll get it first thing. And it's just a wonderful thing to have. So make sure you're signed up for that. And if you have any your own poems about current events, all you have to do is go to Rattle.com, find under content, Poets Respond, submit there by midnight Friday night, and we can publish your poem on Sunday about anything that's going on in the news, making poetry a part of the world all around us. We're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Yoda Olinyk. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Today's guest is Yoda Olinyk. She's the author and writing coach. Her debut memoir, Salt and Sour, took 3 years to write, and its release led her to help other writers. She worked as a full-time chef until 2022, then focused on writing, publishing, and literary journals, including a poem in Rattle's current food poems issue, and released Dear Future Lover while working on her second memoir. She writes about addiction, love, and nature, often at 5:30 a.m. So we got her staying up late. Hopefully we don't get in the way of your writing tomorrow morning, Yoda. But here she is, Yoda Olinyk. How you doing?
Hello. Hi, Tim. Hi, everyone. Yes, I am. It's past my bedtime already, but it's worth it. It's okay.
Thanks. Well, I'm excited to talk about food and the relationship between that and
Yeah.
poetry, which is always something that's really fascinating. But let's start out with a poem right off the bat. Do you want to read the first one you've got for us?
Sure. This poem is called There's Nothing I Would Not Do. The sweetness of our bond summoned me here to Chiang Mai, a nomad for 10 years, and now you are home. You were in love, not with a girl, but with a city. The red hot streets brimming with locals, crowded bowls all color and spice, crispy midnight chicken, fatty pork belly, fresh lime and peanuts on everything, the chilies, the pork broth, the noodles, the noodles. I came for you, my tour guide, my brother, but I stayed for the food. We devour weeks together. You teach me the proper way to slurp cow soy, how to dress for temple, bargain with bot, sawadika, always noodle soup for breakfast. Indulge me with jackfruit, snake fruit, mango. Dare me with duck beak, grasshopper, ant egg soup. There is nothing I would not do to see you smile. I'd flown across the world just to see you. Signs at the airport, no guns, no explosives, no drugs, and no durian. A fruit so funky and foul one slice could smother an entire marketplace, its stench lingering in the air for days. And now there is nothing but a durian between us. The spiny sliver jiggles out of a bag slippery with sweat and slime sap. Durian smog slaps my nostrils with rotten onion, sewage, skunk, vomit, pig shit. As you chew the noxious jelly, you reveal a secret. There is a 5% chance I won't experience this fruit as vile, but as perfect vanilla flan with toasted, honeyed almonds, rich, floral, silk, magic. My belly apprehension rattles louder than a motorbike as you break a chunk free and hold me in the palm of your hand. Your wondrous full moon smile calls me home, and I raise the stink fruit to my lips.
Yeah, wonderful poem. That was There Is Nothing I Would Not Do by Yoda Olinyk. And you can see the food coming in
Yes.
already. And so I'm really interested in your journey through poetry, which is something,
Mhm.
definitely a circuitous route, falling in love with food and becoming a chef first. So how did that happen? What was, what was your life like? How did you become a chef?
Well, I was always a writer, an avid journaler, I would say, from I kept every journal I've ever had, and my first one that I saved at least was from when I was 10. So 10-year-old me, that's 1998, scribbling in my journal about, all my crushes, and I was maybe a little bit closeted at the time, and I was, I was writing about all my angst and, questions about the world, just really deep stuff. And so I was always a journaler. And I think at some point in my life, somebody told me, or it was thrust upon me that writers, they don't make any money. It's not a real career choice. And so something was drilled into me when I was young that I chose not to take that path of, a career as a writer. And instead, I discovered a passion and an interest in cooking. So that happened when I was about, right, it wasn't something that came young. Like I didn't grow up as somebody who thought, oh, I'm going to be a chef someday. It was actually born out of necessity because my parents got separated when I was about 17, 18 years old. And I was living with my dad, and we were just, eating it was like a frat house. We were just eating like craft. Actually, that's not fair to frat houses because I don't know what they eat in frat houses, but you know what I mean. We were eating like frozen pizzas, craft dinner, like, and eventually I was like, "Ugh, we need to eat some real food. Like we need a salad or something." And so I got down one of my mom's recipes from when she would cook for the family. She used to make these big feasts every Sunday, simple food. My family's German Ukrainian, so it was a lot of cabbage rolls, borscht, pierogi, and different like roasts and all that kind of stuff. So I took down this recipe for Sunday roast and decided I would try to make it, and it was not very good. I've got a whole chapter in the book that I wrote about what a disaster this roast was. It was like this lump of gray meat with like pastel purple colored gravy because I added the wine too late and all this stuff. But even though it wasn't very delicious, I noticed was like my dad ate it, like he ate the whole thing, and I could tell that it nourished him more than something from the freezer, some frozen meal. And I did that a few more times. I tried a few more recipes. I got a little bit better each time. And kind of by the end of that summer, I said, I think I'm going to go to culinary school. Like, I think maybe this is what I want to do.
Oh,
And
wow.
the rest is kind of history, I guess. Yeah.
Wow. So is that fast? And that's interesting. My wife Katie went to culinary school too.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder, because it was the same kind of story for her. It was cooking after her parents were divorced that got her.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And for myself too. I'm not a foodie type person, but I do really like to cook. I enjoy it, and it's the same for me. My parents were divorced, and it was make dinner or eat snacks or something for dinner some of the nights. And so yeah, I wonder what the correlation is between like, children of divorce and, becoming chefs and going into that direction, because it seems like there might be a parallel,
Yeah. And it's not the first time I've heard somebody say, oh, yeah, me too. So, yeah, there's definitely some parallel. And, I think now, of course, I have I did a lot of work with young kids in schools when I was professional chef, volunteering in schools, teaching kids about basic cooking skills. And now I see it as like, oh, this is a skill we should all really have, and we should all have the privilege of learning when we're young. But the reality is like, if you've got someone cooking for you at home, like why learn, right? And then all of a sudden when you don't, you start realizing the importance of not just food, but like good homemade food, and how much that can impact your mental health, your well-being, how you feel, and all of that stuff. So it's really something everybody should have the privilege of learning how to do, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many parallels between cooking and writing, and that brings up another one.
Yes.
We'll talk about that more later. Let's hear another poem first, though.
Yeah,
next
sure.
up, I have No Seatbelt.
Yes. So these two poems are both written from the same collection, which I wrote about my best friend who is also a chef, and we've known each other since we were 5. So definitely feels more like a brother, but we are not blood related, but best friends. We both turned out as world travelers and chefs, and I wrote a whole collection for him. So both of these first 2 poems are from that collection. This is No Seatbelt, and it is as close to a traditional sonnet as I could make it. As in ziplining in a monsoon, rock climbing an itchy fault line, skydiving at midnight, chasing tigers with your luck, making puffer fish a 3-course meal, eat raw chicken just because. As in locking hands with a scorpion, bungee jumping from a burning tree, dancing with the king cobra at a full moon party till dawn, waking up face down in the retch of the sea. As in taunting a great white, bathing with piranha, taking a trek through the jungle with a black widow as your guide. Living fast seemed a death wish until now, as in driving down a backcountry road.
Yeah, there was No Seatbelt. Yeah, Yoda Olinyk.
That's,
Yeah.
oh, that's hard. That's a tough one to read out loud. I've been like waiting to read that one out loud to someone who would love it, and that's like a tough one to read out loud. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Powerful
Yeah.
poem. Thanks for sharing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So you fell in love. You decided to go to culinary school. You fell in love with cooking.
Yeah.
And so what was that like? That's not an experience many of us have had. Is it, I know Katie's was kind of grueling, it's a lot of, I mean, like the Hell's Kitchen kind of thing makes more sense. Like it doesn't seem like fiction. So how was it for you? What was your experience like there?
I think grueling is a good word. And also, a lot of chefs are artists, right? They're artists, so they're naturally intense people, you know. I think most of the people I had more camaraderie with when I was in culinary school, I think, than I've ever had in my life outside of that. Like just the idea that everyone's kind of got these intense, everyone's so driven there because everybody wants like to be a chef at their own restaurant someday, and everybody kind of wants to you know, be in a magazine or like have something like Anthony Bourdain had. It's kind of, at least when I was in school, that was like the big you know, talked, if you surveyed anybody in my program, that's what everybody would have said that they wanted. And so it's intense. Yeah, you're putting your heart and soul onto the plate in some ways. You're trying to make it art, and it's very technical, like writing can be. It can be very technical. It's kind of like this blend of passion and maybe natural talent with the technical aspect of how do you get the sear just right, or how do you get the seasoning on point. And those are the things that you can learn in school, but those are also the things you can learn through traveling the world and making mistakes and writing books and eating and enjoying food and all of that. So yeah, it was a mixed bag. I had a great experience at school. I went to a pretty small, like a mid-sized school, and yeah, I had a great couple years there. Intense though, definitely intense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then you became a chef,
Yeah.
and you know, worked in that, and then eventually moved on to to writing with your memoir. So what was that? What was behind that transition?
Oh, well, there was a lot. There was a lot behind that transition. So basically, yeah. So I became a chef after school, and I was kind of working around. I was bebopping around, traveling. I was working in Australia, and then I'd come home. I was broke. I'd come home and work here for a bit, then go off somewhere else. Worked on the West Coast. You know, just living as a, you know, 20 something with big dreams would do. And then when I was about 25, I met my then partner and decided I'm going to settle down. I'm going to put some roots down here. And I decided I was actually at that point kind of, I would say, struggling in the restaurant world because I'm an addict, and I was really struggling with substance use and the fast pace nature of fine dining restaurant life. And I recognized that when I was like, thankfully, when I was pretty young. And I decided to shift gears from the fine dining world, sort of the corporate ladder, to um, catering for myself. So I opened my own business.
Hmm.
I had $620 in my banking account my first month, and I just was like, okay, my rent's $1,000, so I just have to make that and I'll be fine. And I lived that way for some time. And then I started to have some success. So I started to have some success and started getting some really cool opportunities. As a professional chef, I got to do lots and lots of cool stuff. I did a full dinner, cooked a full dinner on a moving train once. I catered a wedding in the middle of a field with no running water and no electricity. I was a private chef for some really cool, awesome people, for Jane Goodall and, you know, different people like that. So I had lots of really great opportunities. And I was kind of coasting along, and I had paid off like my student debt, and I bought a big van, and I was, you know, checking off the boxes of adulthood.
Hmm.
And my then partner at that point said, you know, it would be a really crazy next step, instead of like buying a house or having kids. You know what we should do? We should open a restaurant.
Oh wow.
And I was like, but I just got out of like I wasn't really that into the idea, but there was a part of me that part of me that was like that kid in chef school who like wanted it, and who kind of was ego driven to say, do I really just like want to be catering forever? Isn't it like the like the next step is to like own a restaurant, open my own restaurant, and how cool would that be? And so I sort of reluctantly agreed to that plan. This is the subject of my memoir. The subject of my memoir is basically that journey of essentially like bending my own heart's desire to appease someone else's and sort of the consequences of that. And it's, a 300-page memoir, so it's a long story. I won't tell it now. But basically, the result of that was we opened. I slipped into a pretty deep depression because I was kind of doing something that I didn't really want to be doing. I liked aspects of it. I liked being involved with food. I liked the camaraderie of running a kitchen. I liked that I was proud of the food that we were putting out. But there were other aspects that were going on that were really troubling to me.
Yeah. And restaurants, are really hard as far as
They're really
financially,
hard, yeah.
they're really tough businesses. The margins are so low, and one
There,
mistake
it's
can,
oh
or
my
one,
gosh.
freezer going out can ruin,
People
know?
really don't know. They
Yeah.
really don't know. I remember once we have a Canada Day weekend here. It's like the 4th of July, but it's on July 1st. And this particular July 1st was like on a Tuesday. And we had to have this whole like hour-long meeting to figure out if it was financially more viable for us to be open that day or close that day. And it's like, that's just one day. That's just
Yeah.
one day that we had to discuss over and over and over, right? So anyways, the long story short is I left my partner and closed my restaurant in the same night, upending my entire life. And then kind of the last section of the book is sort of me coming to terms with, well, what do I want to do now? If I'm not going to own a restaurant, do I want to go back to being a chef, or do I want to try something else? And working on the book, when I started working on the book, it was really just to purge my thoughts and feelings, because I was in a really, I was 30 and I was bankrupt and I was single and I was really struggling, and I just started writing stuff down, and then I kept writing more pages and more pages, and then I had kind of like what felt like a manuscript, and I thought maybe that's the journey. Maybe I'm supposed to write a book, and yeah, and that was another 3 or 5 year journey, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's great. You mentioned you might want to read a passage from the memoir. Do you want? That'd be a good time if you have one handy.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have the book right here, and it's funny because the anniversary of its coming out into the world is coming up soon, and it's been a while since I leafed through it, and it was kind of fun. It was a bit nostalgic for me to go. Maybe I'll just read, actually, just because you and I were just talking about it. I'll just read this little blurb about my experience in culinary school. So this is from page 25 of my book, Salt and Sour. Culinary school consisted of what I would describe as a fairly typical college experience. I spent too much of my student loan on cheap beers at the local pub. I gained the freshman 15 after eating too many late-night curbside fries with gravy. I fought with my roommate over who ate the last of the crackers we co-owned. Overall, college had been a fruitful experience, and I was learning a lot about food. Even though I cooked all day in class, I went back to my dorm each day craving more. I managed to make some pretty elaborate feasts on my $15 hot plate, including some authentic spaghetti and meatballs with the cute Italian boy in my class. We rolled fresh pasta dough on my tiny countertop with an empty wine bottle and hung it to dry on a coat hanger. We simmered tomato sauce all day while listening to folk music and drinking boxed wine. We made giant meatballs with his grandmother's recipe, and around 11 p.m. we ate. By that time, we were half drunk, and it felt like we were half in love. It was such rustic and bewitching food. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. So that was a portion from Yoda's memoir, Salt and Sour. Yeah.
yeah, I can show the book if people can see it.
Yeah. Great cover too.
Thank you. Yeah.
So just so many things come up with the comparison between cooking and poetry, and you already mentioned how much the culinary school is all these people that are driven to be like the great chef, and it's so similar, everybody in an MFA program, for example, like just driven to be the next great poet. But then there can only be so many, people that rise to end up with the tenure track jobs and the awards. It's not that many. It's a very tough competition. And so it's interesting, that parallel. And the other thing I was thinking about was the talking earlier about how much, the good food mattered to your dad, and it strikes me that poetry is so much like the good food of really our ability to consume. Like you feel more connected and grounded after reading poetry Can
Hmm.
you talk a little bit more about that? About how it's, because we have all these other things we could do. I mean, you could
Yeah.
read through social media all day and kind of be
Hmm.
entertained, have your little dopamine hits over and over again, and then feel like crap, like you're just binge eating chips, you know. And
That's
yet,
so true. Yeah.
and yet there's poetry that's there that's like really good food, and we tend not to reach for it. So I don't know, I'm just curious to hear
Such
your thoughts about that.
Such a good analogy. And my book, I did write this book almost well, more than 6 years ago. It came out almost 6 years ago. And when I read it now, I'm like, I might be overdoing it with the food to words metaphors here. If I rewrote it today, I'd probably have less metaphor. But I like the comparison of, and I use food analogies in my work as like an editor and writing coach a lot, where I really like the analogy of what like yeah, a poem is to a good meal as like yeah, social media is to junk food or something like that. It's so true. And I think, I've heard something recently, I don't know what you think about this, but I heard something recently about like everybody wants to be a writer, but people don't want to be a reader, right?
Hmm.
Like we're all you know, in this it doesn't have to feel like competition, but in some ways we are all competing for the same space sometimes. Like if Rattle has 30 poems they're going to publish that month and you get 1,000 people submitting, we're all kind of competing for those 30 spots, right? And so like by its very nature it's kind of it can be ego driven, like you
Hmm.
said, just like any field, we all want, I think it comes down to we all just want to be seen, right? We all just are so desperate to be seen
Hmm.
because that's the way into connection is when you can see someone or be truly seen by someone. And poetry is like not just seeing someone, it's like seeing someone naked, right? Like it's like being fully exposed. And I think cooking can be like that too. Like I've cooked many dishes for people over the years that have felt like a poem.
Hmm.
It's felt like writing a poem. And I don't know, maybe that's something that only poets can understand fully. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's something that other people experience when they're cooking or eating or doing anything else art related.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's that. To me, I think it is that flow. That mental state where you have the skill to be doing things automatically on like one level. And so then you
Hmm.
can be creative. That's where creativity actually takes place.
Yeah.
And so cooking, with poetry, you learn the craft of how to make you
Yep.
know language sound musical, and build up imagery and use metaphor and symbolic language and move along. And once you have that skill, you're like just free, like a really like a cook, like grabbing the spices and going for whatever you want. And it feels like cooking is the same way. It's like you get into the zone, right? And you start to just not really think, and you're absorbed in what you're doing so completely that it's like
Mm.
both a break from the reality of your daily life and something creative that you're making, which always feels good too. So I think,
Yeah.
is that how it feels to you?
Well, I think that that's a really good way to put it to you because like it's the difference between, buying a loaf of bread from the store and making whatever, a sandwich with it versus if you've made that loaf of bread and your hands have been in it and you've been methodical about how you put that loaf of bread together. It can feel similar with a poem, like if you're writing something on a deadline or you're trying to force it because it's for a theme, maybe. It's not going to come out the same way as if you just kind of like open your fridge and say like, what am I having for dinner, right? And I think, yeah, I think that that's to be honest, it's interesting to me that I'm like, I haven't really thought about it like that before, but that makes so much sense. Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's nothing like being in the flow in the kitchen. Like there's
Hmm.
nothing beats it. That's actually why I like to make Ukrainian food and German food a lot because it's not that it's complicated, it's just that it's hard work. Like making pierogi from scratch or cabbage roll from scratch, it's not a complicated dish, but it doesn't take a lot of steps, but each step that you do, maybe the 5 steps that it takes, take a long time. So that when it comes out of the oven and you're ready to like put it on the plate and take your first bite, like you know what's gone into it. And that's why it feels so good.
Yeah,
That's why it
maybe
feels
like
so good.
formal poetry, like all the little
Yeah.
nuance that goes into it.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting, Ruth Reichel, when we talked to her, mentioned something
Yes.
about, and I guess it's one of her points. And I'm not a foodie, so I have to step back and say that because I haven't read her memoirs until then and
Yes.
stuff. But her main point, or one of the ones she makes, is that we should all be appreciating and noticing the food in our lives, and cooking those meals that taste good and are healthy at home. And, being you don't have to be a chef at a 4-star restaurant or whatever to try to make a good meal that people will enjoy and appreciate. And that is one of the things about poetry too, to me, is that we're all enriched by writing poems. And the fact that we don't all end up with books and, tenure track jobs like we talked about before doesn't stop the fact or diminish the fact at all that when we write poems, we gain so much out of them, And so I think that's one thing too. I always used to think about it because I play sports more than I think about food. And I think about like how, I'm not a professional baseball player, and yet I love playing baseball and then softball or tennis or whatever. And nobody minds the fact that they're not, nobody I've ever played with. I don't think I've ever, well, I guess in softball once there was a couple of people that were serious, but mostly, people don't even think about becoming professional athletes. And yet that doesn't diminish at all their love of the game and trying to get better and playing and how much they get out of it. And I think that if we had that mentality about writing, we'd be a lot better off. But there's this like glimmering idea that everybody can be a best-selling author if you just work hard enough, or and I think that really gets in the way. I mean, imagine if we told every kid that they could be a basketball star, even though they're like 5'3" or something. It just doesn't work.
I wonder if it's different because food is like cooking and food and eating, they're necessities, right? Whereas enjoying a game of baseball or deciding to pick up guitar and learning guitar for the joy of it, those aren't things that you have to do. Those are like, it's like a bonus in life, right? Well, for most people. And cooking though is something that we have to do to sustain ourselves. I wonder if that, and then I wonder which side is poetry on? Because for me, poetry is a necessity. It's very much a necessity, like eating. And some might say, oh no, like soccer is a necessity for me, right? Like I suppose it depends how you look at it, but I do think about that sometimes if that makes a difference in how people feel about cooking, because sometimes I think it can feel like a chore. And that's why some people don't enjoy it as much. I often have, like, people will invite me over and say, oh, they'll be really nervous to cook for me because they know I'm a chef. And I'm like, just make me a PB&J. Like it's not about what it is. It's not about, going back to Ruth's interview, it's not about what it is. It's about effort, it's about the, and it's about, and even that, it doesn't have to be on the best bread with the homemade jam and hand ground nut butter. It doesn't even have to be that. Just give me some Skippy, it's honestly, it's about the act of you made something for me to enjoy and to nourish my bones. Like that's what it's about. And like, if we applied that to poetry, like, come on, that would, I feel like that could really impact the way people go about not just writing, but how they share poetry with the world. I talk to so many people in my work as a coach of like, it's not perfect yet. It's not perfect yet. I'm like, but what if you put it into the world anyways? What if it's just a PB&J, and that's good. It's good enough. It's perfect as it is. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And because poetry it's so really, it's any art, I think, or any, we're put on the earth to do things and make things. And, we need that feeling of having accomplished stuff, and the way that art accesses our psyche and the things that we aren't quite aware of that our subconscious has been trying to tell us. It's just so valuable to have that connection. And so I think it'd just be great if more people just thought of it that way. And honestly, that's how I think of it, which is why I don't publish, I don't send my poems out for submission. It's really hard to get me to put books together, because it's just, to me, it's the sitting down and writing, and, you have to share it somewhere, and I have this space here to share stuff and, social media, just post stuff. And that's all kind of I really need, which is maybe a bad thing if you're trying to be a writer, but that's really where the value is. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's hear their poem. I think it's been too long
Yeah,
without a
for sure.
poem. Let's do the next one.
Definitely. Okay, so I'm kind of shifting gears here. I'm getting out of the food world. I'll go back into the food world, but I wanted to share this poem because I very recently lost my dog.
Mm.
Anyone who knows me that's watching knows that this has been a very big loss for me, and I've kind of been on a bit of a grief journey for the last 2 months or so. So I really want to read this poem that I wrote about her while she was still alive. This is a poem called I Cannot Write a Dog Poem Without Calling It. And it's a lead-in title, so I'm going to read the title again. I cannot write a dog poem without calling it unconditional love. For all the times I've lied about my age, relationship status, hair color. For all the times I've been careless enough to leave a candle, or sorry, let me try that again. For all the times I've been careless enough to leave a house I don't own with a candle burning. For the time I got banned from Uber, got so drunk in Ohio I woke up in Austin. For the time I stole that ring, the one I could have paid for from that sleepy seaside shop in Alma. For the time I wished him harm, the time I loved him but didn't say it back. For when I screen my sister's calls, even though I have the only number in her phone. For the 18th apology, the missing tooth, the black eye, for everything that happened in June. For the time I fought so hard, sorry, for the time we fought so hard, I stopped watering the orchid you gave me, or the time I Googled what plants thrive best in a cold, dark room. For the time I killed a spider just for looking at me. For every time your water dish goes dry. For every 24-hour chip, you paw my bruise as if to say, you are a good girl.
Oh, that's a sweet poem. It makes me miss my dog too. Died
Oh, that
a
made,
couple of years ago.
oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Um,
Emotional
so,
trigger.
so you wrote the memoir. How much was poetry a part of your life, like throughout that experience? Was it something that you were doing? Writing a memoir is really different, even though in a lot of ways poetry is often memoir-ish, but it's very different than the rhythms and the movements that you hear in a poem like that. Were you
Yeah.
always writing poetry at the same time, or did you sort of move to poetry after the memoir? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I would say I've had right now I'm in a very steady monogamous relationship with poetry, but I have been in an on and off again relationship with it over the course of my life. Like I dip into it and then I leave it and I come back to it and I for now like where I'm at now, I'm poetry is my what I love writing most. It's what I love reading most. It's what I love talking to people about most. But it hasn't always been that way for sure. I wrote a lot of poems, those angsty, like A, B, C, B rhyme scheme poems that we all wrote when we were young. And I still have a lot of them. And I'm like, oh gosh. Um, so I would say I wrote poetry for most of my life. But when I was writing the memoir, I didn't really consider myself a writer. It wasn't like, oh, this is going to be the thing that turns me into a writer. It really wasn't on my radar, as certainly not as a career option, but even as a serious hobby or it was more like I have something that happened to me that's like dynamic and like big enough to turn into a book. And I think it's a story that people want to read. And when I got, it was kind of like when I went on the publishing journey of like, how am I going to get this book into the world that I was like, oh, maybe this is something that I could perhaps like do as a vocation. And during that time, I was also kind of getting back into poetry at that time. I had signed up for some like writing workshops online. And this was at a time where I was like, I didn't really think there were like a lot like people out there like me who like really wanted to like face their demons through the act of writing. I felt very alone in my in these like just intense angsty poems that I would write that were just dark and seriously processing something. And then I joined some writing group online and I just remember being like, oh, there's like lots of people out there like me. There's tons of people. I'm now this small fish in this big pond. And that felt really good. All of a sudden I was like, maybe like I felt maybe there's community out there. And so I was kind of dipping my toe in very gently to that. And then the pandemic started. And all of a sudden, all of my favorite writers that I could never afford to go fly to California and take their, writing retreat, all of a sudden they were all offering them online and for very reasonable prices. And so I signed up for a few of those, and some of those I still attend. 5 years later, and I'm still part of those communities.
Like workshops, by the way, yeah.
Well, there was one like Ellen Bass had one that I was just like, I had only read maybe 2 or 3 of Ellen Bass poems, but I was like, I'm sure I could learn infinite things from this like amazing writer. And sure enough, I did. And I met some really wonderful friends from that workshop. And then I was taking some classes with Lori Wagner, who runs the Wild Writing group. And I was and doing some small local ones too. Like my library had a virtual write-in every Wednesday night, and I would go to that, and it was like me and nobody there was the same. We were all like from these very different backgrounds, and yet we would just get a prompt and we'd free write, and then we'd all share it. And I'm like, who are these people? These are people that I pass on the street, and I had no idea that they're these profound poets. And it was really heartwarming for me to realize that I really wasn't alone in how I felt about writing. And that's really how it took off. I started really being very consistent with my writing practice, in the sense that I was going to 2 or 3 or 4 sometimes of these workshops every week. And any place that had a write-in, I would just go. And, I'd often show up being like the only Canadian in the room, or sometimes the only, young person in the room, or whatever. And I always found friends, and I always was just grateful to have the time to write, even if it was just 20 minutes. So that's kind of how I got into my poetry journey. And then I just started taking it really seriously, and then started working on craft a lot more. And
yeah, that's fascinating. Because your poems are very well crafted. You can hear the music in them. And so many people think that an MFA program is what you have to do. You have to go get that degree that so many people do. And when you get submissions to Rattle, people, I think in the other magazines that we don't publish the bios that are like, oh, I've been here and here and published here, but the other magazines, you look and it's like, I've been in this program, I was in this program, and that gives us a sense that you need to do one of those programs. But we talked, for Jennifer Jean, who was a guest a couple weeks ago, a long time ago, in the adjunct issue, about how she thinks that the college is dead for creative writing. It's just going to be more and more of this, which is just wonderful. Those workshops that Ellen Bass does. Kim Addonizio, who was on earlier, has a wonderful workshop out of her home too that she does online. And there are so many examples like that. And you really don't need to get, a degree in order to, write wonderful poems and share them and find a way to express yourself, which is what we're all craving. And the only thing you get out of those programs actually are all the connections and the networking and all that stuff. And I think we want a world where that's not the thing that matters. So, the people's MFA, as Dick Westheimer says. Exactly. That's what he calls Rattle. And I like to think of it that way, too.
I love that. That's well said. And I because I didn't take the academic track, I went to trade school, and then I was working right out of school, and I never had the opportunity to go to even think about doing an MFA. And then during the pandemic, when everyone's was making career changes and stuff, I started thinking about it, and a lot of the advice that I got from writers I really seriously admire was like, do you really need an MFA? Like, is that something that could you just keep doing what you're doing? And I think, I love the idea of the people's MFA. That's a good, I've personally learned so much from just reading random poetry journal, every time I get the Rattle one, I open it, I read it, and I'm like highlighting, oh, this is a device that I haven't personally used before. I don't know if I'm capable of that, but I'm going to try it out, and learning about form, learning about how a poem looks on a page. These are things that you truly learn from trial and error and from really trying it out for yourself. You can study it and learn it too, but there's another way. And I think that's it's a good way of putting it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Really well said. Well, this is the time I should say, if you're enjoying this conversation in the poems, please make sure you click the like button. There's twice as many people watching live that have clicked like so far. And when I say that, it shoots up, and that makes more people see the show later. So click the like button now. And also, if you have any questions for Yoda, leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube. Those are the 2 that I watch. and I'll pass any along. We already got some good questions. One really tough question, but first let's share another poem. What do you want to read next, Yoda? And by the way, we might not have room for all 8, so if you want to skip any at any point,
I'm going to skip the next one just because it's a bit of a longer prose piece, and I feel a bit sad about my dog. So I'm going to go back to the food world. I had another poem about my dog, but that's okay. I'll share it somewhere else. This is a poem. I don't know if you ever write poems like before, during, or after just a session of people watching. I'm not sure if you're a people watcher, but I love to bring a notebook out and sit at a restaurant. The seedier the better, like a seedy diner, and just observe people and take notes and then try to find a poem. So this is a poem I wrote when I was sitting at it was this random shop in Montreal. The only food they only sold one type of food, and it was pork dumplings. It's literally nothing. You couldn't get a bowl of soup. It was just pork dumplings. So it's called Hole in the Wall. 2 women, side by side, all hairnet and apron, flour-crusted fingertips. The older one claws a piece of dough from its mother with 3 bony fingers, rolls it between loose palms, does the shimmy, shimmy shake as if she was making fire with 2 sticks. The dough is now ready to become dumpling. The other woman, more nimble, slips the pocket over the ledge of the table, mashes ground pork and scallions with a putty knife into a crease. A pinch, a roll. With one slick flap of her wrist, a tray is filled with cinched soldiers. Hi, she bellows, and a boy scurries in to collect the tray, replaces the tray, and they begin again. Steaming hot dumplings land on my table. Perfect little pillows of pork peppered with chili and scallions. The ginger comes later, spanking the hearth of my tonsils with garlic and coriander. Intentional oil pools around seeds the color of tea and cream. I pierce a dumpling by its pot belly, ready myself to take a bite of the Mona Lisa. The older woman sees me watching her and is not bothered. Many white women have watched her, and I want to be different. Fold, pinch, roll. I want to be the one who writes a poem about it.
Yeah, it's great, and the food poems are wonderful. And obviously, the food's going to come in. And food's so difficult. We already talked about the margins at restaurants. The other thing is writing about food is hard. We talked with Ruth Reichel about that, but how there's fewer descriptions for taste than any other sense, and it's so easy to just. As soon as you see the steak was sizzling, you jump right to cliches. It's hard to. There's so many food cliches, I guess, because there's so few words that we have that then we just use the same words over and over again. So writing in a fresh way about food might be harder than almost anything.
Yeah. And to be honest, I like the challenge. Like with this poem, if I look at an older version of this poem, like my notes or the first draft of the poem, it was littered with cliches. I remember thinking about this action of when she takes a chunk of the dough, puts it in her hand and rubs her palms together, right? And something in my head was like, oh, it's like when they're making fire and they have a stick, right? So how do I turn that into like the image instead of just saying kneading the dough? Like there's got to be another way. So that's actually such a challenge that I love. I love playing with language in that way, and just creating the image that lands, like the cinched soldiers, because because they're all so uniform. And I was thinking, oh, that's like a bunch of soldiers kind of standing in a line, right? And so it's writing those things down and remembering them is more challenging when you're actively writing the poem in the shop. But yeah, I agree. It is. I mean, I think he can come at writing about food from so many different lenses. Like I like coming at it from a lens of I want this poem to feel very nourishing and grounded, and so I'm going to use language around that. Or I want this poem to feel like an adventure, like someone's eating a food that they've never eaten before. Or I want this poem to feel sensual because I'm writing about something that eating it feels sensual. Like different layers of language, I think, that you can put in a food poem that I haven't found with other subjects matter. Like it's not as easy to write about nature from 6 different lenses. For me, there's kind of one, maybe 2. But food, I think there's a lot of opening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's so many different experiences with food and ways to think about it. Yeah. So here's one of those tough questions we got. Yeah. So Dry Montito says, "What is your favorite dish to eat? That's the easy part, maybe. And what poet's poetry most resembles the taste of that dish?
Oh my goodness. Okay,
I
that's
know,
the
that's
hard
tough.
one. Oh my goodness. Oh, what's my favorite food to eat?
Yeah.
Okay, I love fried rice. This is like current day. If you ask me this a week from now, it might be different. I love fried rice. Like this is what I eat for breakfast a lot of days. Fried rice with so much seasoning, it's almost obnoxious. So like tons of ginger, tons of garlic, tons of scallion. Make a paste. Like too much sesame oil. You want it to really taste like that. Rice, leftover rice. Sometimes I'll put, shrimp or whatever if I have something, but usually I just have fried egg on top. Then I put like sesame seeds, chopped up cashews, whatever I have, a ton of chili oil, ton of hot sauce, ton of cilantro. Like it's almost like it's covered, like it's covered in seasonings.
Hmm.
So I consider that like I don't make that dish for people because I'm like I don't think that that's something I want to be like assaulted by my breakfast, like I want it to be like very I want to start my day and then be like nothing, no other thing I'm going to eat is going to top that. That way if I eat like bland food the rest of the day, it's fine. So I eat that a lot. And I think if I was thinking of like poetry that feels really like over the top like that, or like a poem that shocks me. There's this poem, but actually, no, that's not the right fit. Hmm. There was a poem, I can't think of the poet's name right now, but it was the first poem in the food edition of Rattle that I read and I went, like, I gasped at the end in a way that was like, I want, I want more of that poem. Like when I'm eating the fried rice, I'm like, I want more of that fried rice.
The
I
Last
like,
Rodeo by Sherry Alms, is that the one you mean?
yes, I like poems that, um, I like poems that make me feel really uncomfortable. Like I
Hmm.
like poems that challenge normal subject matter and make me think about something differently.
Hmm. Is there
Yeah.
a way, food does that too? Like, do you like food that challenges your expectations? Is that a line up?
Yeah. Yeah, like that fried rice because like when I'm eating it, I'm often like there's too much like like, you can't even see like the rice is disappearing. And also I think fermented foods do that for me because I never know what it's going to taste like based on like I make a lot of kimchi and sauerkraut and stuff, and those are foods that like a lot of people don't like. A lot of people don't like the flavor of bitter, but if you balance it with something like steamed rice or lightly cooked vegetables or whatever and you eat it with that, it's like a good poem that shocks you but also has like a real lyrical element to it that also soothes you. Like that's what I'm looking for.
Well, very nicely done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hear another poem next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to read this one because it's a shorty and we've been talking a little bit about the importance of food and poetry and stuff. And this poem I wrote in this really cool workshop that was on the subject of Wikipedia. The workshop was literally called like Wikipedia poems. So the challenge was to pick a anything from this big list, and then we all went away and just looked it up on Wikipedia and Googled it, went down a rabbit hole for 20 minutes or something, and then you had to write a poem about it. It was really interesting, something an exercise I'd never done. And I chose Monet, the painter Monet. And I kept thinking about this thing that Mark Nepo said to me once, and that's what I wrote a poem about. So this is called Deathbed Art. By his wife's bed, Monet noticed her skin blooming into a brand new shade of blue. As she choked her final breaths, Monet fled to retrieve a canvas. Some say he missed her death because he was busy painting it. But us poets know he was as close to it as he would ever get.
And that was
This is a
Deathbed Art. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a poem that's been through. The original draft of this poem was 3 pages long, and it's just been cut and cut and cut. This is the shortest version. of it. And I love, I think that's another challenge in poetry that I love. I love finding the perfect image. And then I also love how can we tighten, how can we tighten, how can we tighten? Yeah.
Mhm.
Sometimes I go too far, but
Yeah, I was going to ask that because, how much is that normal? Is a lot
Mm.
of editing part of your process? Because I was going to ask with
Yes.
that using the starting a fire metaphor for the dough. Is
Mm.
that something that you go back and work and add later, or is it like
Mm.
because there's kind of sort of two ways people approach. Some people spit out everything and then just trim
Mhm.
out the stuff until you have like the short poem, and some people like sort of stick a pin in the yeah. I know I need a better image there, but I'm just gonna keep going, and then you work on that later. What's your writing
Yeah.
process more like?
Well, have you heard of the term like swooper and basher? Have you heard it
No, I
called that
haven't heard
before?
that. No.
So one of my teachers said like there's these two, just what you just said. Swoopers are the type of writer that, yeah, you download everything and you write and then you sleep on it, you go away from it, and then you come back and maybe edit it later. But so swoopers they swoop quickly, their writing process is really quick. Bashers kind of write a line and they kind of like don't move on to the next line until that first line is right. Like bashers are kind of cutting it up as they go. I guess I guess I'm more of a basher with poetry. I think um I can get a little bit obsessive about about finding the perfect image and about cutting my work. Because like I said, sometimes I do overdo it. And even looking at this poem deathbed art, I think I like one draft earlier. Like I think there's one draft before this that I cut something that I should put back in, but then I like the advice too of like at some point you got to put the red pen down and you have to just accept a poem for what it is and it's done and it's like we were saying earlier, it's good enough. It doesn't need to be it can just be the peanut butter and jam sandwich and it's that's a delicious meal. So so yeah, I think I'm more of a basher in that sense. Like I think I edit more as I go. How about you? Do you
Yeah,
identify
yeah,
more
I'm
with
definitely a
one?
basher. I
Yeah.
I don't, and the thing is, I guess when I was younger, I bashed a lot more quickly. I don't know, maybe
Mm,
in my old age,
yeah.
I'm slowing down the bashing, but I still, but it's like I feel to me, it feels like once if you because every sound affects every sound later,
Mm,
and it's like
true.
it's like if it's the wrong word, then it like ruins later sounds to me,
Mm,
and so it's like I need to get every line right, and so I hit a road bump or a log jam or whatever, and I got to clear it before I keep going, and that's sort of the
mm.
problem, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
So when
that
I yeah.
does that hinder the process of finishing a poem? Or
Yeah,
is
I
it
mean,
just
it does. I think it used to not as much, but more, I guess I used to give more time to writing too, I guess. So sometimes I like time out, which used to not happen when I just stayed up all night. So that's a difference too. Um, speaking on the topic of process, though, Terry
Yeah.
Miller wanted to know how does your early morning poetry writing session begin? Do you read other poems before writing, or do you just start writing? And I also want to know, is it before or after the fried rice?
It's usually before the fried rice. The fried rice is my maybe my reward for for all the for the writing. So I usually a long time ago, like a lot of people, I started doing morning pages, which is advice from the Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and I do my morning routine is very I'm quite I don't know. I was going to say the word strict, and then I was like language matters. I don't know if that's the word I want to use. I'm very dedicated to my morning routine. I'll say that. And so I have my morning stuff, and then I usually do a meditation. I do prayer and meditation. Um, that is, a literal prayer to the writing gods. Please, please help me find the words today. And then I'll sit and I'll do a journaling practice. So I don't use prompts or anything. I literally just open to a new page and I try to fill at least one page. And sometimes it's a list of things I have to do later that day and I'm just downloading them. Sometimes it's like I'm having this big feeling about something. It's always different. And then I try to read every morning for 20 minutes, half an hour is better. And it's not always poetry. I read a lot of memoir. I read a lot of prose collections. I read some fiction. Um, and if I've done my morning routine and I've been like dedicated to it and I haven't checked my phone and I don't have a lot of stress, after that it is like I'm primed to write a poem. Like I am absolutely like all systems go. And I almost always handwrite a poem. If I'm in a workshop and it's fast moving, I might type it, but I usually start by handwriting a poem. And sometimes it doesn't turn into a poem. Sometimes it turns into just, you know, a haiku or well, that's a poem, but I mean, sometimes it turns into just some combination of words that may or may not feel poetic. And what I do with those is I have a little box that I keep them in. And then these are, if it's nothing, if it doesn't turn into a poem and it's just a line, these sometimes become kindling for something later. I very rarely discard those and write them off as, oh, this is nothing, because it came to me for a reason, you know? So yeah, if I follow that routine and I get my fried rice in there, yeah, I'm primed to primed to write something. Maybe not a full poem, but something, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we got 2 poems left. Do you want to do
Yeah.
In Opie's Kitchen next?
Yes. So this is, I write a lot about family. Family has come into my writing more and more as time goes on. This is a poem that I wrote about. This is one where I tried to make that the ending. I'm aiming for a gasp at the ending. I don't want people to know the ending of this until I get there. So this is in Opie's kitchen. In Opie's kitchen, we finger paint white napkins with beet juice. Opie wears cabbage leaves as a hat. Potatoes are juggled and later become canvas for googly eyes and pipe cleaner hair. Omi and Opie sway as the borscht simmers. Mom and Dad argue in the other room. Sister and me arrange cakes and squares on a platter for after. We all sit down to eat. Someone says, "Thank you, dear." Someone says, "Pass the salad." Everyone smiling, everyone slurping, everyone playing make believe.
Yeah, well, that's a powerful poem that was in Opie's Kitchen. Yeah, so
Mm.
thanks so much for sharing that by
Yeah.
Yoda Olinyk. Let's see. So another one of those. We'll go back to the tough questions. I think maybe
Yeah.
they're harder on chefs than other poets because Jamie Thomas wanted to know what recipe and poem would you pair for someone you owe an apology to?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. Thank you for that question. Okay, so in my book is my book, Salt and Sour, is part cookbook, part memoir. So it is a memoir, as in it follows, a chronological storyline, but I've also included 17 recipes in my book. So recipes like the pot roast that I told you about, that kind of follows that chapter. There's this one recipe that I included that's called, it's a melon gazpacho. It's called Sarah's melon gazpacho. And this was something that on the night my restaurant closed, which was the saddest day of my life. It was such an awful time, couple days, and I was kind of beside myself. And I had to complete a service that night. I had to cook for the full dining room, and I was really I hadn't slept, and I wasn't, I was really not taking care of myself well. And we were also trying to use up all the ingredients that we had on hand because we didn't want to have to throw them away or anything like that. So, and it was August. So, where I live in August, melon is very seasonal. So, we had just like a crate of different types of melons. And so, one of the cooks that was working there that night blended them and made this really beautiful melon gazpacho. And it had coconut milk in it. So, it was very velvety and it had lots of mint in it. So it was just, and lime juice. It was just really, really refreshing. And I was standing there and I was just like, so distraught that I was just kind of staring at the chipboard. I wasn't moving. And this cook, Sarah, brought over a spoon and was like, "Do you want to try it?" And so I tasted a bite, and it just, the way that it coated my mouth and my throat and my stomach, it gave me such a sense of like everything's going to be okay in this moment. It's hard to believe that like a melon gazpacho could do that, but truly, I can still taste it when I talk about it. My mouth is filling with saliva. I can still taste it to this day. And so I knew I really wanted to include that recipe because I thought giving someone a bowl of that, like it would instantly cool a person down. So if I wronged somebody, I would give them a little cup of that and say, "Drink this first. Let's cool you down." And then I would apologize. And I have had to make many apologies and then wanted to feed somebody with something delicious like that. Was the question also what poem would I include?
Yeah, is there a poem that you'd pair with that?
Um, you know, I would maybe pair I was chatting with Kim a bit before we started tonight, and I was saying that I just submitted a poem for there's a group of poets who are making an anthology after Kim's poem to the woman crying uncontrollably in the next stall.
Hmm.
And so everybody was to write a poem based on that poem, starting to and then the last line of that poem is, "Listen, joy is coming. Listen, I love you, joy is coming," right? So um, I would probably pair it with that poem. I think that
Yeah.
that would be a really beautiful way to say, this isn't the end of our journey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Um, we're over an hour. Still haven't talked about doula of words in your work as
Mm.
a writing coach.
Yeah.
So what is that? How did you get into doing that? And what is
Yeah.
doula of words? How do you think about that? And I'm interested in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I when I first closed my restaurant back in 2017 and I started I was kind of traveling for a bit, unsure of if I was going to get back into cooking or not. Then I was working on my book as well, but I wasn't really ready to take the plunge of like I'm going to try writing, as a job and as anything full time. So I started my catering company back up again, and I was quite happy to do that. And then again, the pandemic hit, changed the landscape of hospitality work, pretty drastically, as I'm sure anybody remembers. And I was like, I can't cater weddings anymore, so I started this like donut shop, and I was like doing all these like different kind of things while I was also getting pretty seriously into writing. And then I was faced with a kind of decision in late 2022 where I was struggling with my sobriety. And I was kind of thinking maybe the thing that I haven't tried is kind of flipping my life on its head. Like, if I want to live a different life, I have to live a different life,
Mm-hmm.
and accepting that. And one of the roadblocks that I was finding was I just found it really hard yeah, maintain sobriety while I was working in kitchens and living that kind of lifestyle. There's a lot of that goes around in the hospitality industry. It's kind of known for it, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it has to be that way, but I think that's the way that it is. And so I kind of took a leap, and I said, I'm gonna I'm gonna try to write, and I'm gonna give it a year. And if I don't find some way to do it in a year, then I can always go back to cooking or I can go back to school. I'll figure it out. I have a very entrepreneurial mind. I had started my catering company when I was like in my early 20s, and I've never had a job since then. So I have a very entrepreneurial mind. I'm very much like from the background of like, if you have an idea, you just keep trying until you make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of thought of writing that way. And I had people reaching out to me saying, I read your book and I've always wanted to write a book, and do you have any advice? And so, some of those people hired me, and it kind of found me, this whole like helping people bring their books into the world. Why I call myself the doula of words is because I learned about the word doula means helping somebody through a big life transition. We often associate it with birthing doulas, but there's
Mm-hmm.
also death doulas and marriage doulas and all kinds of different doulas. So I thought, well, what about a writing doula to help bring your words into the world? And since then, it's been going great. I've been doing it full time since 2022. Well, my favorite part about it, I think, is like, well, I literally get to read and write all day for work,
Mm-hmm.
and that feels like a gift. And sometimes I pinch myself and say, I can't believe this is my job. But the other thing is, it affords me to have a lot of my own time to write, and I've been able to work on. I published a book on Substack this year. A couple of the poems you heard tonight. I've been able to like really work on my other manuscript, and I really just get to talk to people about their books and their dreams and poems. A lot of people come to me with, wanting kind of one-time editing on like a single poem kind of thing. So I get to walk people through how my crazy brain works in terms of editing, and that it's just been really fun. Yeah, I kind of can't believe that it's a couple years in and it's going well. So
Yeah, well, that definitely does sound like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Are you open to people contacting you? Like, are you booked up with people if people are
Yeah,
interested?
it's no, I would love to talk to anybody who's working on either I would say I specialize with folks who are working on either memoir or poetry or
Hmm.
some derivative of that, like maybe lyrical prose or anything like that. I've worked on a few like fiction projects and novels and stuff like that, but it's not where I shine, I don't
Hmm.
think. But really, it's about keeping people on track for finishing a manuscript is a big one, and all the stuff that can get in our way of finishing a manuscript. Like, there's lots of, it's every single person I work with is different, is on a different journey. And then also the publishing, the business side of things. How do you get how do you get an agent maybe? How do you self-publish? And really the aftercare of that, because I'll tell you, the day my book came out was when my work began. Like writing the book took 3 years and used one side of my brain, and then
Hmm.
the day my book came out and I had to have all those people asking me questions and the title, I always joke and say, like, the title of my next book is When Your Mother Hates Your Memoir. Um, so there's lots of stuff that especially if you're writing memoir or poetry,
Hmm.
because it's so personal. There's a whole other phase of what do you do after your book comes out. And
Yeah.
when I brought my book into the world, I didn't have a lot of support in that realm. So I want to be that support for other people. So yeah,
Hmm.
I'd be totally open to it for sure.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, definitely something that's needed. We're up on time. Do you want to finish out with Payphone?
Yes, I'd love to read this poem because it's a poem it's probably my most recent like finished poem. I just wrote this one a couple weeks ago, so you can kind of see my style as it is today. So this is called Payphone. My mother gave us each a quarter and with grave sincerity said, "If you get scared, find a payphone and call for help." We were about to ascend into the cab of my father's Navy pickup. Our father, who tends tomatoes, cans peaches, watches each leaf of each house plant with a toothbrush in April. There was no reason to fear our father, but this is hardly a poem. The poem is my father barking bear trap of a man, whiskey growling, and it's only noon. His rage a neon tendril bursting from seed as he slingshots a clay pot at our tiny bodies. We are rushed into the house, gathered behind a door. Calls are placed, plans are made. A cloud of hushes sweeps over our farmhouse. Even then, I knew he didn't want to hurt us. He told my mother he would go to anger management, and he did. But that day, my sister and I clutching hands, clutching coins, as our whiskey-soaked, pulsing love poem of a father drove in the direction of the general store, singing about how he would buy us each a new bike helmet, baseball glove, reading lamp. My fear so hot, that quarter melted like wax. If I had to, I, 9 years old, sharp as a tack, could figure out how to pour liquid into a payphone. But who would I call for help when my father wasn't home?
Yeah, that was Payphone by Yoda Olinyk.
Yeah.
Yoda, thanks so much for being a guest. It was great poems and such fun talking to you today. We really appreciate it, and everybody's enjoying it too. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and for being such a big part of my poetry life. I don't know what I would do without Rattle, and it's an absolute dream to be published with you. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for saying that too. Take care, Yoda.
Yeah.
Yeah, once again, that was Yoda Olinyk. You can find all of her work and her work as a doula at her website, Doula of Words. That's DOULA of words.com. So find Yoda there. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was the following: write a poem in which a wall comes down. So it's pretty simple. One swing prompt. Write a poem in which a wall comes down. That is your prompt for this week. If you have a poem to share on that prompt, email it now to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines, all one word, at rattle.com. Then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy on Facebook and YouTube right about now. But only go there If you have a poem to share, if you'd like to just watch and enjoy the poetry, stay right where you are. Also want to remind everybody that the max time on camera should be about 3 minutes. It's a 1-page max for poems, so if it's a longer one, filling up a whole page, make sure to just jump right in. If it's shorter, we don't have to worry about it so much. We want to make sure we get to as many people as possible and don't have people falling asleep at the end of the prompt lines. So let's get to everybody as quickly as we can. And we're going to take a quick break and go to the prompt, so sit tight, and we'll be right back with more poetry. We're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Now, usually Katie would be joining us. Katie had a traumatic experience at school, and she wanted to sit this one out. She'll definitely be back next week, and she's here in the chat, as you can see. But it's not going to be here on the prompt lines tonight. But she did have a poem to share, and the poem is this. Remember, once again, the prompt was write a poem in which a wall comes down. Let me fix this. And here's Katie's poem to that prompt called Third Person. Oh, hang on a second. Somebody is not muted. Wait. There we go. Okay. Third person. The last bud on the magnolia waited for her to come home, the petals, white strokes applied with a broad brush. Afterwards, the paint poured on. In a gush of wind, the elderberry branches snapped. Their berries may be medicinal, but their seeds are poison. Under the corner of her desk, a spider twists its trap, but a dandelion still bobs its head when it's full of seeds. She can almost believe. Yeah, great little poem, great last line. That was Katie Dozier's poem, Third Person, to her own prompt this week. And my poem is the following. It is this. A plaque said it was the oldest wall in the country. Get a little bit there. A plaque said it was the oldest wall in the country. It was. There was a length of wall in the center of the field, surrounded by a chain-link fence. Summers, a man would come with a key to mow the grass that had grown up against it. 2 passes were all it took before the mower was back in the truck, but the trim blades held the shape of his walking for the rest of the day. Like nesting boxes, green within a darker green, squares within squares, the stone wall at the center, as if it had become the portal of time that it was, an eddy at the bottom of the pool the pool where those ancient rocks had cooled. No one noticed. You could tell the season by the length of the shadow it threw on the slope of the field, but no one cared. In the winter, it would shed white caps of snow. Sometimes a squirrel would scamper across its heavy spine. And that is my poem. I'm kind of tired of the way poems finishes, so I'm trying some different things, which I tried last week too, sort of. And I'll see how that hits. But that was the poem for this week. Plaque said it was the oldest wall in the country. And let's see what everybody else has to share. Good crowd on hand. And first in line for the first time in a while was Dick Westheimer. I mean, the first time first. He used to always be first, is what I'm referring to. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
Other people discovered their trigger finger and wait for that link to come up and just
I
get right
guess
in
it's
line.
spam. Yeah, well, you got it this time. So it's great to see you. What do you have to share with us this week?
Well, I have a poem about a wall coming down.
Oh, interesting. Okay, what are the
Yes.
odds?
What are the odds? I'll just jump in and read it. And as always, these prompts. Gosh, some surprising things happen to me in the middle of these poems. It's
Hmm.
it's an addicting feeling. What walls are good for? Two 20-something boys, Kevin and me. A claw hammer and a crowbar was all it took to bring down the wall. The house wasn't much, a kitchen with an iron drainboard sink and an avocado green Kenmore range, a dim lit parlor room, 12 by 12 with a lone window facing north, and up a narrow stair, an open place for sleeping and storing our stuff. That wall wasn't holding up much, we figured, just keeping daylight from running room to room. We discovered a chimney with an opening for a stovepipe behind the plaster, and the two of us guys lived in that place till Kevin left right before the blizzard of '77, and I stayed there alone, slept winters right near the wood stove, till I met a woman who's become my wife. She loved the wide open feel of a house with no walls until she didn't. Said she felt exposed. So I built little rooms upstairs, each with a door that locked. And tonight I sleep in one and she in another, because sometimes it's good to keep the dark that lurks in one room from creeping into the other. And sometimes it's good just to sleep alone.
Yeah, well, great poem, Dick. Yeah, I love those poems. About love and the realities of marriage. What walls are good for. And I gotta be honest too, Dick. I saw you posted this poem on the Rattle prompt group, and I started to read the beginning. I realized you were talking about hitting down a wall, and I was gonna write one about demolishing a wall, and then I thought, oh, I don't want to. Let me think of something else. But then I realized I already wrote a poem sort of about that experience. So it was probably a good thing.
Well, we are in the same house. It is just we've build it up in sort of like little cancerous new rooms, new kitchen, a real bathroom, and all these
Hmm.
things that we didn't have in 1976.
Yeah, well, it's a very cool house and that cool farmland. I got to be there once, and it was a great experience. So, yeah, thanks, Dick, and really interesting to know some of the background too.
Yeah, thanks. See
Yeah.
y'all.
Yep, that was Dick Westheimer with "What Walls Are Good For." Next up is Christiana Doucette.
Hello,
Hey, Christiana, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm pulling up my poem over here.
Okay,
There you go.
well, I'm pulling it up too. Here we go.
Yeah, so I did another one of those ones that has the kind of the maze in the center of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think I seem to go through phases, and right now I'm in a phase where I want to play with words and have them be able to go into each other in a variety of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts and ends with haiku, and then it has um, that center where you can read it multiple ways. So I'll just read it one way.
Okay. Yeah. Oh
But
wow.
it out of the cold. This was once mine. The quarry holds its breath, ice sheets cracking. The year I am born, Berlin, city torn in two, the time-worn view changes, and this concrete crumbling hiss, tacked, not attacked, twist fists open as words fall, a clarion call will tear down that wall. And then the last haiku is something doesn't love, neighbors wallpapering over all the new holes,
Hmm.
or something doesn't love neighbors, wallpapering over all the new holes.
Well, very cool. Yeah, I mean that forum that you're developing is so interesting, and I want to sit down, after the show and take a closer look because it's so complicated. That is really
I sent
neat.
it, yeah, I sent it in through the prompt lines already because we're getting ready for another family trip.
Oh,
And I
great.
wanted to make sure
Hmm.
I sent them in. I think the first time I wrote one of these, it was like 8 syllables in each box, and this one
Hmm.
I just did 5. But I
Yeah.
tried to keep, I like the way that it sounds better if I keep the same number of syllables, and if the last word in each column
Hmm.
is either a rhyme or a near rhyme,
Yeah.
because of then you get interesting sounds without it getting too overwoven with each other, where you miss, you don't feel the rhyme piece of
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, have you come up with a way a way to call this? What are you calling these? Yeah.
I think Chelsea McClellan called it the Doucette Roulette.
Ah, the two set
That's what she's
roulette.
called it every time that it's come up.
Well, that's great. So she's coined it for you. That's really wonderful. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing another Doucette roulette, Christiana. It was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Christiana Doucette with "Out of the Cold." Um, and I don't know if Christiana has seen yet that we have an invented forms issue coming up next summer at Rattle for forms that poets have invented themselves. I think she's practicing for that one, maybe. All right, let's see. Up next is Zachary Honeycutt.
Hey Tim, hey everybody.
Hey, Zachary, how you doing?
I'm doing great. So I have a high bin today, not my usual.
Oh, a little
Yeah,
different. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, changing it up there, Tim, and back in my book nook, but with no posters. All
All
right.
right.
What's on my mind? Let me tell you, if I can. Not just one idea, but many ideas. Not just one story or poem, but many stories and many poems. Not just one book or one or two scenes from the book, but many books and many scenes and characters and worlds from said books, and plots and plot holes and the like. What's on my mind? What's in this crazy, crowded writer's mind of mine that's so jam-packed with characters all begging for my attention? It feels like they're going to burst out of my ear canals and hang for dear life from my earlobes, then get themselves together and do good old-fashioned, old-school, hand-to-hand, epic Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones style combat on top of my nose, or dangling upside down from my eyebrows before the chosen one finds her way back inside my head, inside my mind, and shouts at me the loudest, "I'm the one you have to write about today." I wish it was like that, on autopilot, with them making decisions instead of me, in some kind of organized, chaotic event like that. Not like when I'm working or shopping at the grocery store and my mind decides to have a mind of its own, or when I think I'm alone and someone catches me talking to myself because the scene that's trapped inside my head is spilling outside of my mouth, and the dialogue between the characters talking is coming out of me like a spirit being cast out by a priest that's not there. Sometimes the priest wins the battle on top of my nose. After he wipes the goo off himself after crawling out of my eye socket, and I get inspired by God to write Christian things. But sometimes this weird creature that's lurking somewhere in the attic comes out of me and tells me to write something that you shouldn't read alone at night unless you want to be up till 3. And then at 3 in the morning, sometimes I wake up and write sonnets, but not like necessarily romantic sonnets, more like those strange alien abduction sonnets that might not be for everyone, but you know that some single guy who's age 50 plus and still living in his aging mother's basement with long, unsightly fingernails and a collection of conspiracy clippings would appreciate it, and print it out and hang it on his wall like black and white gold. My characters jump out of my mind and off of the page. They leap over themselves as they break the fourth wall. They leave it intact and pretend my readers don't exist, and their world within the written page is real, as they should. Writing myself into a wall, rewrite the direction.
Oh, really interesting, Zach. Yeah, the great energy in the prose and a lot of confessionalism in there too. That was a really wonderful poem. Thanks for sharing the
Thank
Hyben,
you.
Zach.
Thank you guys. See you guys next week. Great
Yeah,
show.
take care. Yeah, it was Zachary Honeycutt with "What's on My Mind." Next, let's go to Nivedita Karthik before it's too late. Well, she's on break. Hey, Nivi, are you there?
Hi Tim, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Great to see you.
Good to be here.
Okay, so I'm pulling
Um,
up yours. What do you got for us this week?
uh, it's a metaphorical wall, not an actual wall. And I know it's two pages, but then the poem is just one page. The second page is just a single line about where it was previously published. So I
Okay.
have
Well,
no
no worries.
idea.
No worries at all. Okay.
So it's basically about how, as women, everybody tells you that you're supposed to be seen and not heard and things like that. So I've taken that and turned it around on its head. And I started writing in the third person, but then towards the end, realized that that's also me. So that's sort of me breaking the wall and figuring out that that's also me.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, pretty clever. Yeah, let's hear it.
Niagara is a woman. You are the woman spewing forth ideas, cascading down the boardroom and kitchen tables. You are the woman shushing those who interrupt your powerful flow. You are the woman, the curtain, the mystery, only revealing yourself to those able to withstand you. You are woman. You are Niagara. You are the woman whose movement is shadowed by her stillness. You are the woman that splits yet unites the galaxies. You are the sound that begins the universe and the one that will end it. You are woman. You are Niagara. You are the sound I hear in the traffic, in the swipe of a curtain, in the static of the radio, in the voice of every sheep. You are woman. You are Niagara. You are the sound that carries a scintillating conversation with my human psyche. You are Niagara. You are me. I am Niagara.
Beautiful poem. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Nivi. That was Niagara is a woman. Yeah, thanks so much, Nivi, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yeah, goodbye. Yeah, Nivi Karthik with Niagara is a woman. Next, let's go to Terry Jude Miller next, one of our favorite poets in Texas, not too far down the street from us. Hey, Terry,
Hi,
how you
Tim.
doing? Yeah, it's
Oh,
great to
doing
see you.
great. Doing great. Had a rough week, but so happy to be here. I'm not often able to attend this, but it is one of my favorite things to listen to. So thank you for having me.
Oh, definitely our
Uh,
pleasure, and thanks for the spirit you always bring to everything, Terry. We always appreciate it.
awesome. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna just jump right into my poem.
Okay.
It's called Old Homestead. In the woods where they first settled, a single stone wall stands, remnants of a hearth and fireplace, other walls long ago fallen. What memories are stored in these stones of the cabin's building, one mortared rock at a time? Kudzu and white pine circle the structure as though to enshrine what once happened here. 10 lives, then none. One by one, the walls fell as wind and rain and sun beckoned a return, an ending, a beginning. Listen closely beyond the brushy hush of trees. Hear voices at the hearth in faint refrain singing. Hear the empty chimney howl, for it knows no other words for loss.
What a beautiful ending. I really love the ending, Terry. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely our pleasure. That was Terry Jude Miller with Old Homestead. Next up, we'll go to Nate Jacob.
Tim, it's good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you, Nate. How you doing?
I'm good. Uh, I thought I had a lot of words in my poem until
Until Zach's. Yeah,
So
he filled up the page, that's for sure, but he usually does.
yeah, he's good at that. But mine is kind of long, so we'll read it.
Okay.
Titled "What Was is What Is Again," um, with apologies to Robert Frost. What if the Great Wall of China had been in its heyday only an average Chinese wall, available to any emperor at all, with daddy's credit card and a simple dream of separating something somewhere from something other somewhere nearby, and depending on the day of the week, the day of the month, and the wall sales manager on duty that day saying something along the lines of, "What is it going to take to get you into this wall today?" before anything else happens on either side of wherever it is you plan to put this dadgummed wall. And the Chinese junior salesman nods his red-clad head, tacky even in those days, smelling of dark breath, cheap and plentiful aftershave, and maybe gunpowder. And this wall isn't going to get any cheaper, he says, though Fast Freddy down the way said he'd beat any price and would even throw in a marauder or two, or, if it suits your needs, the newest fangled anti-marauder technology, available only today and only if you upgrade the wall to the con trim, which means you'll be the envy of everyone in town except, of the cons themselves, whose walls are all spectacular, great even, though frankly too high, too old, altogether too utilitarian, even for the cons, whom you forever avoid at New Year festivals because their family dragons are always too long, compensatorily, especially for how short the cons are. A family of Napoleon complexes and world domination plans. And so you sit back in the wall sales office chair, lace your fingers behind your head, suggest, what about something used but like certified? And so they show you some artist renderings of the so-called Great Wall as it would look from space because they say it's totally that big. Would we lie to you? And you know they lie all the time, but who doesn't? And the Great Wall happens to be in a good part of China, and the price is almost right. And in your head, you work out that if you meet in the middle with the down payment and the trade-in value of several thousand terracotta warriors, you can get this deal done today, can take possession of the Great Wall of China and the parts of the wall that don't quite go where you'd wanted them to be, you'll knock down, move every stone over to the new bend, make the Great Wall greater, great again even. And what is there anyway that doesn't love a wall? History churns another surprise revolution.
Well, that was a really fun poem. Thanks so much, as always, Nate. That was great.
I'm trying not to be political, I promise.
I don't know. Thanks so much for sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah, it was Nate Jacob with What Was is What Is Again. Thanks for sharing that, Nate. All right. Next, let's go to Brian O'Sullivan.
Hello.
Hey, Brian. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to be here. So I have something that starts out sounding like a poem about a wall not coming down, but I think it eventually gets where it has to go.
All right. Yeah,
It's
let's hear it.
called, it has the strange long title, A Summer Seminar on Vision and Nationality in Classical and Postmodern Art and Literature, in case the world needs another poem from the ruins of Rome. Although the papal states have fallen, the Vatican walls are still holding up well. They'll pierce roads now and then to let the modern traffic in and out. They still serve, do not doubt, to keep the ghosts of the modern out. Or that might all be bullshit. Anyway, I went there one time. I saw Richard Simmons in his prime, geeking out in the Sistine Chapel under the blank gaze of Swiss guards. He didn't seem to find it hard to be all Simmonsy flamboyant in the house of gender norms. It's a lively memory, but all mortal things are subject to decay. Later that day, high up in a cathedral, some skeletal medieval abbot, sans his habit, now part of the statuary, a memento mori, looked down at me and winked. I blinked. Did I see that right? Well, probably not. It might have been trompe l'oeil, or maybe I hadn't filled my water bottle enough on a blazing, hazy day in Rome. Who knows? The next morning, an earthquake rumbled the hills. Unheard of, but it really happened. No big deal, just a little tremor. It takes a lot of tremors. Tests on tried, sweet indulgences, a missed mass, to erode the walls of truth, of faith, or of the body until they fall. And even after that, when the Pope dies, I watch the conclave coverage and start Googling obscure Catholic stuff, following rabbit holes under the walls, wondering if there's meaning in the rubble.
Well, that's great. Love the ending. I love that turn too, or that might all be bullshit. That was great. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thanks so much as always, Brian. So much fun. Yeah. Take care. It was Brian O'Sullivan with a summer seminar on vision and rationality in classical and postmodern art and literature. That's great. All right. Next up, let's go to Tina Daniclaw.
Okay. Hi,
Hey,
how
Tina.
are you?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I have another long one, so I'm going to jump right in.
Okay.
Agape love, she wrote. Nearly 7 decades ranching in the sandhills of Nebraska, self-reliant, never reaching beyond her surrounding counties. Delighted to get my emailed note, then silent. I felt the reasons. My 43 years in California, academics in science, Navajo spirit poems, clearly blue on Facebook. I have held each brick in that wall. Strong in faith, I'm so sorry, still strong in faith, my email header, reaching out again. Would you like to join my prayer circle? She needed to know who we think is listening, who we expect to respond. We're Christian. She's relieved the world hasn't drawn me away. Agape love, she wrote to us all. So sweet to have my sister friend close by again. Our nascent wish to be wellsprings of peace, to walk a devoted path. Teenagers, we lay shoulder to shoulder on her antique iron bed, eyes to heaven as we shared our closely held thoughts. I'm going to conceive my children in this bed, she told me. And in time, she did. Her future seen at a glance, mine still unknown. Our whispered hopes, like prayers in the quiet before dawn. Someday, she will meet my Muslim friends, my Hindu friends, my friends undefined, sisters to me, each as she is. I learned agape love in the expanse of sandy hills from my dear sister friend, and I never forgot. For God so loved the world, the whole world, all of us. Agape love is God's love.
Very sweet poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Tina.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was
Thank
Tina
you.
Daniclaw. Yeah, with Agape Love, she wrote. Yeah, very sweet. Let's go next to Clayton Clark.
Hello there.
Hey, Clayton, great to see you. How you doing?
You and everyone here. So I have the complex of a father for the wall. Here are the equations we can pencil out together, daughter. Here's the hammer which we'll build the birdhouse, with which we'll build the birdhouse. Congratulations, your first flat. Here's the jack, lug wrench, I'll get the spare. Before search engines, a joker. His party trick, I'm a psychiatrist. But he always came clean. Then there was the tooth he'd remove to speak with a whistle. He Halloweened as Goldilocks with 5 o'clock shadow. I didn't know he harbored 2 wars in his stomach. When I learned of it, I never asked a thing. Didn't know his younger brother, when both were teens, died in a car crash on a mountain road. All this concealed behind a retaining wall, covered in his soft skin, strong but porous. Wasn't ready for the house of him to collapse so fast after the wrecking ball of a diagnosis.
Really tough poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Clayton.
Thank you.
Yeah, really powerful stuff. That was Clayton Clark with The Complex of a Father. Next, let's go to Carla Schwartz, who, if you saw Carla, your poem was the most... hang on. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm here now.
Yeah, well, great to see you. And your poem was the most read poem from this Hyben issue. Was the most liked poem or whatever, rattled poem on and this spring. So thanks for that too.
Thank you. And yeah, that was fun. And so let me just bring up my poem. It's very short. It was I love the interview tonight. It was great. The reading.
Yeah, that was a
discussion.
lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So the only wall that came to my mind besides those physical walls was the fourth wall that comes out in poetry. So it sort of came out in a lot of my poems this week. And this one is the Hyben, very short. Dear reader, it's true. Pain drives with me. Every step I take is like saying the wrong thing. Little explosions, fireworks, or drone strikes. I see yellow beauty in the purple face of a tomatillo flower. I look out over the water and want only to plunge in. Dive or die? How can I fix this? How do you? Breaking the fourth wall, invitation to jump in, Ars Poetica.
Really cool. Yeah, good use of that wall. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Carla.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Looking forward to everybody else.
Yeah, Carla Schwartz with Dear Reader. Next, let's go to Mike Bales.
I made it back in time. I was reading some poems in the Chicago suburbs, and I got there a little late. Then I made it back here to read here.
Oh, very cool. Well, good to see you, Mike.
Yeah, I hadn't been there for a long time. I'm going back 50 years for a poem in Ames that had a unique name. That's the Cave-In Bar poem that I sent to you.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. Yeah, go ahead.
The Cave-In Bar. When the adjacent firehouse is being built, the south wall of a bar near the university collapsed. Progress, perhaps, something lost or something gained. Questions were asked before starting work again. The story to be told over beers and games, a pool, and a place where men and co-eds gathered. Far away from their hometowns, they made their lives and later wondered how quickly 4 years could pass. The university rose from meadows and fields, and mirrored facades of classroom buildings reflected aspirations and dreams. The oldest buildings in campus surrounded the grassy Central Mall, bore their age while students like children played between classes. Anti-war skits were held on the steps of Curtis Hall to bring back the soldiers who were drafted for war, while the joyous chimes of the campanile filled the air. A long winter had turned spring. Mythology was shared generation to generation as people crisscrossed their way to classes, that a brick of the campanile would fall each time a co-ed lost her virginity.
Well, very cool
That
poem.
was one of the myths.
Yeah, well, it really makes that place come alive. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. It was Mike Bales with a Cave-In Bar. Next, let's go to perhaps a first-time caller, Billy D. Nope, just got to unmute. There you go, yeah.
Not really first time. I've been a lurker for years.
Great. Well, it's your first time on the Zoom, though, sharing a poem, right?
But it is, it's my first time participating in the Zoom, yeah.
Great. Well, great to see you. Where are you calling from, too?
I'm in southern New Mexico, about 30 miles. I'm in a very rural area, about 30 miles from El Paso, Texas.
Ah, great. Well, so glad to
But
have you here.
I'm from San Diego and LA. I'm a California girl,
Ah, great.
newly transplanted. But anyway, um, the Whittier earthquake in 1987, and my house was literally demolished.
Oh,
So
wow.
this is about that. And the poem that I submitted, I have revised at least 5 or 6 times, but that's my style. So if you don't mind, I'll read the latest iteration,
All right.
and
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
it's called Fault. A sleepless night. I step away from my computer desk just before the rafters lurch sideways, as if Godzilla were shaking the house in a B-grade rerun. Where I'd sat moments before, heaps of plaster, a Mac SE crushed by the vintage beams my late husband and I had stripped and varnished by hand, the Craftsman trim, the burled oak floor, even the stained glass transom tremble as this fireplace splits, the roof ridge yawns open to the morning sky. Then comes the cloudburst, pouring down what walls remain, soaking everything the earthquake had spared. Books and linens bloom mildew, old photos curl like dry leaves. Though I'm unscathed, no brace, no mortar will hold this house together again. Sometimes walls come down to let the light in, sometimes to shake the past loose.
Well, very great. Yeah, and that is my worst nightmare, having lived in Wrightwood, right on the San Andreas Fault. It runs right through town for 12 years or 15 years or however long that was. I mean, yeah, you never know waking up and that Whittier earthquake was terrible. Thanks so much for sharing that, and great ending, too, to that poem. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I hope you come again soon, Billy.
Next week.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, there was Billy D with Fault after the Whittier earthquake. Yeah, the walls definitely came down then. Next up, let's go to Hemant Malik.
Hi.
Hey, Hemant, it's great to see you.
You too. Thank you too. Mine's only short this week. And my last line is because of something Katie said on the Poetry Space this week.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Into the Eagle. We have a rain shower. I step into the square wall of water, and it comes down on my head. I'm childless, orphaned, alone in the world. A moonflower opening in a nameless forest. The woman I wear melds with the soap. I see parts of her slide down the drain. The hurry in her voice at my mother's stories gloops and wobbles before it's sucked to the sewer. The cursing at the incontinence of the cat burps up a cloud of ammonia as it descends. The eyes that roll at the world flip backwards and land in the pipe without touching the sides. I stand, the space behind her. The hum after her voice has trailed. The smell of sun on cotton. The stillness of air unflapped.
Well, very interesting. Yeah, I love that last line. How did Katie inspire that? Because it was like 2 weeks ago we recorded that episode. I don't remember.
Oh, there was a line, something she said about she loves the something that is not happening. I can't remember the words, but I was writing it at the time and listening, and it was like, oh yeah, the unflapping or the not doing something.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, well, thanks so much for that. Wonderful poem, as always, Hemant. That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that was Hemant Malik with Into the Eagle, and she was talking about the Poetry Space, Katie Dozer's show. I'm the co-host along with her. We talk about poetry once a week, every Friday. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, whatnot. In the newest episode, we did one of our duels where we just randomly pick poems from two books by poets, especially poets we like, but you never know, and put them head to head and see who wins. So it was Stephen Dunn versus Kay Ryan, two of my favorite poets. We got 3 poems each out of them, and listen to see who won. All right, next up, we'll go to Jared Campbell.
Hello.
Hey, Jared, great to see you as always.
You see you. All right, so mine is called Reading Comprehension, or I'm going to stop translating myself to you. The self that speaks outworks, outflanks, and routs the self that waits. I breathe my pain onto the glass that shows and separates us, a condensation test. She puzzles on the patterns left as they evaporate. It's best to keep the precious things like life and self contained. The common lives in liberty, invaluable in vain, and once you prick it open, you can never stop the flow. It never goes back in, you know. One moment you're lightheaded, a moment later, dead. Enticing is that bed that offers permanent repose, a bed that lets you sleep inside your finest set of clothes, a deeper sleep than any dream, a rest transcending hours, a bed that's laid with loving hands beneath a bed of flowers. The moments turn to moments with the agonizing scrape of shovels on the sidewalk ice. I hear them in my sleep, the scraping, scraping. What is left if there should be a thaw? The soot the melting snow will leave, tracked in on the floor. Pain pretends eternal while it lasts, but then it leaves, and anger lingers in the mouth until the tongue perceives it's forgotten what the flavor was, and all that's left is shame. An adamant forever, or at least until the grave.
Oh, that was beautiful in that 4/3 ballad meter, and with the rhymes, the slant rhymes coming in. I don't see poems like that very often, and always fun from you. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jared.
Thank you.
Yep, take care. It was Jared Campbell with Reading Comprehension, or I'm going to stop translating myself to you. Yeah, really interesting as always. Next up, let's go to Rick Pongratz.
Hello.
Hey, Rick, good to see you.
Good to see you too. All right. Mine's a little over a page, or about a page, so I'll jump right in.
All right.
Elegy for Pre-Med Curriculum for Dawn. When you had 4 T cells, you gave them names, but most importantly, you tried to give them friends. New friends were fickle, of course, unlocking the door to anyone if the key was even close. The viral nature of the unwanted is impossible to control. They tore down your cell walls and spilled into the neighborhood of your body, like the uninvited drunks at a party who trash the house, stumble outside, and move on to the next. I still see the fire of you. First to get every joke, laughing louder and longer than the rest. I see you exploding out of your flip-flops, beating Madonna to the chorus, except at karaoke where your timing was impeccable. I see you smoldering in jeans and a striped polo at the family reunion, reaching out to me, hoping to find one family member to confide in. I see you waiting in the future lives of all the students in this lecture hall. Smart as hell and cocksure, they've memorized the receptors, meds, and charts. I wonder if I can get them to see you. See your eyes instead of a failing immune system. See your smile instead of CD4 and viral load stats. I try to make them see what a death looks like when a family and a religion embrace shame over sun, to the point that the spark is snuffed out before the life. I try to unlock them, open them up, and place you inside to be the firekeeper for every patient they ever have. I see these students, their self-conscious, perfectionist facade slipping as they realize they love you as I do.
Really touching poem and really important poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Rick.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Rick Pongratz with Elegy as pre-med curriculum for Don. Yeah. Let's go next to Stephen Croft.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Stephen. Great to see you.
Thank you. So in my poem, a metaphorical wall comes down with the assistance of alcohol, but I take a literal wall down too, just to make sure that I conform to the prompt.
Yeah, well, keep your bases
So,
covered. Yeah.
yeah. So this is late Friday night at the VFW bar, where beers become gradients of time, gradually taking good-natured men at a corner table back away from baseball scores and current politics, loosening stories from the past lives that led them here, back to when their hearts were full of darkness. The Iraq vet recalls the firecracker sounds of small arms fire and the flip-flop clomping of tank treads as it pulled up and wound its turret, its round devouring a building's walls, turbaned men thrown like dolls with collapsing masonry onto the street. A Vietnam vet tells of sudden ambush in a fertile delta of trees and rice paddies, unloading magazines, afterwards finding his casings sprinkled over a buddy, and when he kneeled down to brush them off, saw his own reflection in his stilled friend's staring eyes. These are men who can conjure violent figures in a nightmare world where all options seem bad, where heroes who may have saved a buddy's life are the only heroes, where many never got out alive. So they almost never speak of it, keep up a wall of silence. Last call, and they rise unsteady from their stories, glancing at the American flag tacked to the wall beside a reflective Michelob sign. And it may give some relief, some meaning as they head for the door under the red exit sign, outside to where wives drive them home to normal lives and kept secrets.
Yeah, great poem. That reminds me of some of my childhood a little bit, and really vivid details in that too. Thanks for sharing that, Stephen.
Yeah, there was a Georgia poet who's deceased now. He was in Rattle, David Bottoms.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he wrote a poem about playing guitar in his teenage band at his father's VFW, and I read that poem before I joined the VFW, but that his poem kind of rings true as the night goes on. It people get drunk and tell stories, and but then they leave and they do it all again later. So
yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. Really profound stuff. Thanks for sharing that, Stephen.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, with Stephen Croft with Late Friday Night at the VFW bar. Next, let's go to Lisa Seidenberg.
Hi.
Hey, Lisa, great to see you.
Thank you. I'm back. I thought of so many walls. So great prompt. I was actually going to go to the Berlin Wall, but I went to a couple of other walls. So here it is. Memento Mori at Masada. It was a sweltering sun when we climbed Masada. I was wearing moon boots, a fashion for a minute, and unlikely footwear for that excursion. But the landscape did mimic the rocky terrain of the moon. At 24, comfort hardly mattered to me or Annette. She was large and boisterous and halfway up the cliff when she befriended 3 Australian backpackers who hadn't befriended a shower stall in countless days. At the top, Annette snapped a photo of me in my moon boots, and after we scrambled the vertical snake path in record time, and I took one of her with the grimy backpackers, her toothy grin as infinite as the Sinai Desert. Stepping beside a fallen wall that once formed a bathhouse, the icy shadow of death tapped on my shoulder. Once in this place, 1,000 people took their own lives rather than face a fate as slaves. Years later, I felt that same disquiet at the top of the Acropolis, mourning the death of my father. What is it about these Empyrean sites that calls the demon spirits to their heights?
Yeah, really interesting last question there, Lisa. And yeah, that's fascinating stuff. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm working on my turns.
Yeah, well done. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's Lisa Seidenberg with Memento Mori at Masada. Next up is Dennis Usden.
Unmute. Okay, Tim.
Yeah, there you are.
I'll just
Good to
get
see you,
right
Dennis.
into it. No wasting of time. Let the poem speak for itself.
Okay.
Which I think they should. Okay. Library Fight is the name of this poem. It was probably around 1969. My professor had asked me to prepare a paper on 15th century English history. The 729-page textbook was the source of this talk, which I only unlocked the night before my assignment was due. As in the past, I gulped down some uppers, but put my bike in first gear to get to the BU library. I went to the World Book Encyclopedia area to find a summary of the subject, but the shelf was now bare. You need to go to Harvard. We sold it to them, the librarian replied. I went to gather up my stuff, ran into a big fella. He said, "Watch it, son." The uppers must have just zoomed me up as I took umbrage to this talk. I attempted to tackle this tower of a man. He threw me into a wall of books, tumbling on me, knocking me out. Well, that became a real excuse to opt out of the assignment. I received a final grade of F, entered rehab to patch my broken mind.
Yeah, what an interesting story. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Dennis.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Dennis Usden with Library Fight. And let's see. Next up is Steve Horrell.
Hi there.
Hey, Steve. Great to see you.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, glad you're here.
Oh, good. This is a very short poem. It's not a haiku, but it's only 3 lines. It came to me in the middle of the night, and it came without a title, so it doesn't have a title yet. Or it could be A Wall Falls. Anyway, a door opens. Several countries walk through, hand in hand. I could read it again. It's so short.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. Yeah.
A door opens. Several countries walk through, hand in hand.
Yeah, well, that's really wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Steve.
I wasn't going to read it because I'm actually usually quite intimidated by the quality of the poems that are read. So
you
I
shouldn't
thought
be. Just
I
share
into
everything.
submittable. Yeah. Anyway, okay. I'm gonna go back to YouTube where I'm more comfortable.
Well,
Anyway,
it's great to see you.
Thanks
Yeah.
a lot. By the way, Yoda was absolutely great this evening.
Yeah, she was a great guest for sure. Yeah,
I
thanks so much.
definitely have. It's another one to put on my list, which is increasing a lot.
Yeah, that is the
Rattle.
problem with watching these. Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. Always a pleasure.
Okay, yeah. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. That was Steve Horrell. Let's see. And last but not least, thanks for your patience, Ollie is here.
Hello.
Hey, Ollie. Yeah, thanks so much for waiting. Sorry for you beat last in line, but it's great to have you. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah. So what do you have for us this week?
So I kind of cheated the prompt in the sense that I never explicitly wrote about a wall, coming down. It's only implied.
I don't
But
think that's
I
cheating.
intended
Yeah.
I intended this to be a haibun, but I think it ended up more as a mini braided Tonka prose.
Oh, that's really interesting. I actually haven't seen that, so that's cool. Especially we talked about Tonka and Tonka Prose a little bit on the Critique of the Week this week when Sharon Ferrante shared some, if you happen to see it. But yeah.
Yes, I remember. The refrigerators. Cool silver shines in the corvid's eye. In February of 2022, I was admitted to a psychiatric ward. Upon my entry there until my discharge, I stayed in a total of 3 rooms, my skin prickling in all. The rooms lit up as the nurses opened the doors to check on the patients at night. The walls, though mostly ordinary, held a peculiarity. Those facing the outside with windows were covered in sheet metal collecting frost over the weather. The cage collapses against its own weight. The magpie flies. Cool
Yeah.
silver shines in the corvid's eye. The cage collapses. Against its own weight, the magpie flies.
Yeah, thanks so much. And sorry for cutting you off. I forget with the braids reading it a second time, which I like that idea. I think you should, but I forget. But thanks, that's beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Ali.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So that was The Refrigerators by Ali Inam. Yeah, the wonderful poem. Let's see. That's going to wrap up the Zoom. We have, let's see. We have 2 poets that were here. And so first, Sean Evaningo Sanders was here. I guess we timed out not getting to her in time, but I'll share that poem. This is Sean's poem. With a few strokes, he closes the gap. A short haibun here. 55 degrees and cloudy. Perfect poem reading weather. The scene stands before me as summertime at the public pool. I'm sitting here with my hot mug of jasmine tea with a spot of milk and honey. But I swear I'm slurping raspberry syrup leaking through a tiny hole at the bottom of a snow cone. I can hear a splash in the distance, the echo of cannonball. Can you hear it? Watch out. You might get wet too. Waves breaking the fourth wall. Oh, very cool. Yeah, a lot of fourth walls. It's the fourth wall monoku too. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sean. That was Sean Evaningo Sanders. With a few strokes, he closes the gap. And let's see. And also, we always have a poem from Ted. And Ted, as he always does, includes an image. And this image is a strange one, as usually is the case. It is a sort of 2 claymation characters, a hippo and maybe a cow holding hands or something, or maybe stretching. I don't know. Let's see what the poem is. Wimoa. Geez, sing it already. The distortion is your talking. The urge in my ears as I wait is menaced by a loud jungle, which is you talking. Controversy is the unhushed, my darling, whoever darling is. Whoever she is, she needs to reestablish the flow of fountain in the near village, the peaceful village, however undisturbed it is. And be a hippo crooning this song, yes, with a beagle doing the Egyptian, the wawutsi, and the shimmy. Just get her going, don't explain it, sing. The depth of the river deep in the jungle has made us care about root and meaning, but off the wall, mighty is the song as is. Rhythm is on your side as always, so hush, my darling. Don't voice over, don't implicate the word. Just let the world go a weemawit, a weemawit. There you go. That is from The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Sang by the Tokens, was originally written and recorded by Solomon Linda in the 1939 as Mabubi. Now, interesting. Okay. Weemaway. Very interesting poem, as always, Ted. Thanks for sharing that. That was Ted Bernal Guevara. I should have read his note. He says, Dear Tim and Katie, I've counted 17 music videos on The Lion Sleeps Tonight, and the only straightforward, no politics, it seemed one, was performed by a hippo and a dog. All right. Anyway, I've become a fanatic of the song this past week. Very interesting. And then that wall is hidden in there, too. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. And that is going to wrap up the prompt lines for this week. Let's see. Time for the haiku. And the haiku is this right here. Spent a lot of time in the pool the last couple days. And here's a pool haiku. Mosquitoes hovering over the pool, that line. Mosquitoes hovering over the pool, that line. there is the haiku for this week. And the next week's prompt is going to be write a new rondeau that features an unusual noun that begins with the same letter of your first name. So my name is Tim, so I'd pick T, an unusual word, and that would be featured in my rondeau. And if you don't know a rondeau, that's one of the French forms. I don't even know. It's similar to a villanelle, but the repetition is something I have to look up every time. But so look up rondeau, Rondeau, and you will find it. That is your prompt, your challenge for next week, should you choose to accept it. And looking forward to seeing all those. And Katie will be back with us next week for sure. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Michael Lavers. Now, Michael, it's a poet. I don't really know him very well. I've loved the poems of his that we've published in Rattle. I've seen him in other places like 32 Poems, and those poems were great. I'm really looking forward to getting to know him better. He's a professor at BYU. I do know that. So looking forward to seeing what Michael is all about. And a big number, Rattlecast number 300. Next Sunday, July 6th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, we'll have Michael Lavers and your new rondeaus that feature an unusual noun that begins with the same letter of your first name. That is your prompt. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.